So I thought I will share with you some of the work that I am doing or I have been doing. So both in terms of preparing the exhibition, but also in terms of preparing the audience for the exhibition. So the audience meaning the book that I have been working on and that you mentioned, The Deserts Are Not Empty, but also the exhibition that I am working on, and it's going to be inaugurated in Amsterdam at Framer Framed on the 7th of October. So this is an image that I took. It's a screenshot from part of this Performing Colonial Toxicity. The whole project is called, let's say, the book Colonial Toxicity and the exhibition Performing Colonial Toxicity. I give you a couple of, let's say, guidelines about these different components of this project. So the screenshot we are now seeing is part of a component that is more dealing with the translation project. So in order to do this, let me explain a little bit the whole project. I will go into detail later. Now it's just about the other view of it. So colonial toxicity is a term I'm using to describe the French nuclear weapons program in the Sahara that started in 1990. So the very first bomb was detonated in 1960. Sorry, I said 1990, 1960. And the last bomb was detonated in 1966. So in order to speak, exhibit, or expose these histories and events, I am working on three components. The very first one is a translation project. It is the translation of testimonies of victims from Algeria and France who experienced the radioactivity of these sites, and that they are today sick. They are somehow reacting, their bodies is reacting to that colonial toxicity. So they are themselves sick, but they are also transmitting the illnesses and sicknesses to their own children, and their children will transmit them to their children, and so on. So there is a NGO in Lyon called Observatoire des Armements. It's an anti-weapons NGO. They have been working with these victims and they have been collecting testimonies. And my role in this project is to translate them into English. I will speak to that in a minute. The second component is really the exhibition at Framer Framed, titled Performing Colonial Toxicity. I will speak about it, not really in detail. I will speak more about the whole project, because I am working on it and it's going to be inaugurated. So there are many components. The component of, let's say, the records, the archives that are classified to the public, so they are not open to the public. So the private archive that we have been collecting, screenshots of films and videos, but also testimonies, recorded ones. So people speaking about the experiences, but also translated one. And the last component of the project is a book called Colonial Toxicity, Rehearsing French Radioactive Architecture in the Sahara. This is more a repository of documents that create a kind of visual evidence to what happened between 1960 and 1966, and afterwards as well, because radioactivity continued to exist in these sites. So the first one, the translation project, is active. So it's public, it's now open to the public. It's in the website of If I Can Dance Studio. If I Can Dance, maybe you are familiar with it, maybe not, I'm not sure, yes. So it's an art foundation based in Amsterdam, and they work mainly with performativity and performance studies or performance art. So they commission every year 3 to 3 artists and 3 researchers a project. I'm part of the researchers. And before the, let's say, actual performance, before the exhibition or the performance, normally they have this studio. It's a kind of space that they dedicate to each researcher and artist, and we are somehow invited to propose a project. So I proposed to translate these testimonies. So if you go to the website studio, you will have all kinds of symbols, and this is the one that is related to the project of translation, nuclear weapon tunnel 1000. So this, if you click on that icon, then you will have the possibility to enter the website. What we did, we really believe in collaborations and in collective work. So we invited 20 colleagues from the art world, let's say some scholars, some activists, and we offered them a tiny, let's say, fee, but we asked them if they would like to contribute to this project and translate one or two testimonies and make them, let's say, accessible to the public. So on the website now, you will see there are all the testimonies by Algerian and French victims. They are all in French. We did have to protect the identity of some of the people, so that's why you see this, blacked out, let's say, names. Some are already translated, so you can have access to them. And we thought this is very important that before the exhibition, we have a kind of human voice to this tragic events. Human. Also, in order to prepare the audience, let's say, to this very history, but also to the sites of the desert. I edited this collective also book called Deserts Are Not Empty that you also mentioned in the introduction. We thought that it's really important to start with the, let's say, comparative perspective, that this is not a history that is only related to, the French nuclear history in Algeria and in the Sahara or in Africa, but it is a global phenomenon that Western powers, or let's say some powers around the world, considered human platitude, this colonial platitude that deserts are empty, deserts are deprived of life. And this book shows exactly the opposite. It's a statement. It is saying deserts are actually not empty at all. I included essays by scholars and filmmakers and artists, but also conversations. This is another way of performing, let's say, this colonial toxicity, to ask collectives to speak about their work, about the way that they frame the desert, they approach the desert, they work on desert. So we have, for example, curators like the Kuwaiti curators who curated the architecture exhibition at the Biennale 2 years ago, Space Wars, that investigated the Kuwait hinterland. We also have photo essays. So what I will maybe try to do is to give you a couple of examples and then dig into really the work of the French nuclear weapons program in the Sahara. So we have essays, we have conversations, we have photo essays. It was for me also very important to include different generations and disciplines, and to see, to try to compare and to juxtapose these different geographies and different approaches. So I give you one example of one of the contributors. I choose the Minna Agha, who is a Nubian researcher who wrote this very personal essay on her grandmother and how her grandmother recounted and told the story of the deserts in which she grew up and the relationship between Nubia and Egypt. I invited each author to try to propose a poem that will open the text or the essay or the photo essay. I did this because also in my work, since the archives are classified and are considered by the French top secret, I really rely on all kinds of source of evidence, of testimony, be it visual, audio, or textual. And one of the most really influential image that's not really visual, but it's textual, was coming from a book of poems about the desert, about the Sahara, and about the French nuclear weapons in the Sahara. So the poet, and the kid, it's here, she will always with me here. Can you see it? No, because I have this thing with the Sahara. Yeah, no. I have to talk the blurred. Yeah. Okay, this is better. Yeah. Okay, so I can say it. So it's called Sahara Vision Atomique, Sahara Atomic Visions. It's from written by Hawad, and it's in French. It was translated, let's say, into French. It was intermezir. And it really describes this, the colors that these nuclear weapons somehow produced in this territory. So the authors all accepted to propose a poem, and we decided to publish the poems in original language, whatever that language is, and then translate it into English. It was also a way to think about, the imperialism of language as well. We all use English, but all other languages somehow are being, let's say, diluted by this other language. So this is a song poem that's rehearsed in the Nubian desert. So we published it in original, and then we translated it into English as well. So what was really important for me in this collective endeavor is to try to present or offer a view of this territory that is specific to each of the author, to each of the histories of the desert, to each of the approaches of the desert. So we try to represent it, yes, through text, but also images, maps, screenshots, also from documentaries. And this is, at least in the discipline I am from, something that is not necessarily celebrated. Another example that's also unusual in my discipline is to include in an edited volume colloquial language, so conversations about the work that this collective, for example, is doing. It's called Desert's Future Collective. There were 3 PhD students who met when they were studying, and then they all became, faculty members in different universities, and they came together and they established this collective. And for me, it was very, very important because you have one, let's say, South American, one North African, and one North American who are like, they are all speaking about the desert, and each of these people each of them is really somehow experiencing and theorizing and historicizing a desert in a very specific way. And the juxtaposition and the inclusion of these 3 different views is really, really powerful somehow. So these are really very quick examples to just tell you that there are many ways of approaching this territory, but what I really try to do in the introduction, and what I'm also trying to do in the exhibition and in the book, is to again rehearse this statement that deserts are not empty. And here in the introduction, I wrote this piece called Against the Regime of Emptiness, and they start with the let's say premise, and they read it here for all of us, that the term desert stands in for a complex locus of imaginaries, climates, landscapes, spaces, and histories, the territories of both hot and cold deserts, embody various forms of anthropogenic exploitation, such as colonial dispossession, resource extraction, and civil and military occupation. And yet, among the most common platitudes about the deserts are ideas that I quote, deserts are empty, that the desert is absent of life, and that there is nothing at all in the desert. So this misleading conceptualization of the desert has served to legitimize its transformation, manipulation, toxification, and destruction. So against this attitude, this book somehow stands against this attitude. And I think that this idea of that deserts are empty is coming from a imperial attitude, and they were doing, or they were propagating this idea because industrial subjectivities and exploitative authorities are constantly searching for and in need of so-called empty spaces to be filled through occupation, extraction, mining, production, and accumulation. These mechanisms are often intertwined with implicit or explicit forms of coloniality and toxicity, which result in racializing, altering, damaging, or destroying the living, natural, and built environments present in the desert. So this is how really the book is framed and the work is framed. So this is in the introduction. And at the end of the book, I have included photographs, recent photographs. They are all photographs from 2007, taken by a film crew who went together with the co-founder of the Observatoire des Armements, the NGO that I mentioned before, based in Lyon. And they took photographs of the somehow French nuclear wastes and debris that are left in the desert, in the Sahara, and that we can see here. So this is how the book ends. So it's a kind of testimony that here as well, we see that deserts are not empty, and in this case, they were filled with this kind of wastes and debris and remains. So to give you an idea, and this is what the exhibition and the book Colonial Toxicity are about, I can give you a very short overview of what happened between 1960 and 1966, and then how this nuclear bomb kept producing radioactivity after the French left in 1966. So the Algeria as a territory was colonized by the French in 1830, and the independence of Algeria was in 1962. So the French colonial authority, let's say, stayed in Algeria for 132 years. They discovered in the Sahara oil and gas in 1956. So they did start to extract these resources from a number of, let's say, towns that they built as well in the Sahara. And somehow when the Algerian Revolution started in 1954, there were, all kinds of negotiations. And around 1958, when 2 years after the oil was discovered, the French were about to give the independence to Algeria, but only of the northern departments, so Algiers, Oran, Constantine. So they wanted to keep the southern departments, the southern part of Algeria, to the French. So they wanted to separate the two countries, or the two, not countries, because it's not a country, two territories. And the Algerians were very determined. They are like, this is one country, we have the independence of the entire country or nothing. So they kept fighting until 1962. But while they were negotiating the independence of Algeria, the French managed to grant access to its military bases, including the nuclear sites. And they managed also to create a nuclear site for the underground nuclear weapons. So here we have two sites, Ergen and Einnicker, Again, it's in the northern part. I don't know if you can see my pointer. Yes, maybe. Yes. Okay, excellent. So again was a site that was built before 1960. So they started in 58 and they inaugurated in 60 with the very first bomb. While other nuclear powers, so the US, the UK, Russia and China were negotiating the cease of the atmospheric nuclear bombs, the French army was able to guarantee access to a site where underground nuclear bombs were expected to be detonated. So that's why we have two sites, again, for the atmospheric bombs and in Necker for the underground nuclear bombs. So they did build, this is one of the sites, so they built these two sites. One is called the Saharan Center for Military Experiments, so the Centre Saharien d'Expérimentation Militaire. It was built for about 10,000 people. In the exhibition, I'm using photographs that the military, now veterans, but the officers that were there took with them. I mean, as I said before, it's all now top secret. We can't really have access to the records, but this is one of the videos that showed in the 1960s, after the bomb, how the French were able to experiment and execute their atomic weapons program. That's why we have access to this kind of somehow propaganda or this kind of videos that were celebrating the bomb somehow. So this was really in the northern part. So there were 4 bombs. The very first one was called, they were all called jerboas. Jerboa, it's a tiny rodent animal that you can find in the desert, in the Algerian desert, in the Sahara specifically. So the first bomb was called blue jerboa. Then it was on 13 February 1961, and then it was followed by 4 other bombs. So we have white jerboa, red jerboa, and green jerboa. So the very first 3 colors, blue, white, and red. Yeah. And this euphemism of the French authorities, these 3 colors refer to the French flag, and then the last one with the white, with the yellow, white, and green, it refers to the Algerian flag, but the Algerian flag was not allowed in France at the time because Algeria was under French colonial rule. In the south part, in Necker that I showed you, they built another nuclear site. It was called the Centre d'Expérimentation Militaire des Oasis, the Center of Military Tests of the Oasis. It was in Necker. It was built for about 2,000 people, and they used the Hogar mountain, a mountain, or the underground of the mountain, to dug tunnels in order to detonate their underground nuclear bomb. So this mountain here, exactly as you can see, it was there are all kinds exactly of tunnels that we are seeing right now that served to detonate those 13 underground nuclear weapons. They were all named after gemstones, another kind of euphemism that the French like to have. In the book, but also in the exhibition, I'm saying that, the French call them French nuclear tests, and we should not call them tests, we should call them bombs, because these bombs detonated and were really real bombs. And even though the underground nuclear bombs were under the ground, out of 13, 12 of them had nuclear fallout. So they were not really under the ground. They were under the ground, but because they had devastating atomic impact on the population and on the environment, so they are really not, they were not contained. They were not only detonated under the ground because they were able to escape. I mean, all this dust and all these radioactive matters that contaminated the area were really. So this is just to give you like an overview. What I'm trying to do is not only to speak about 1960, 1966, but really this was, yes, the moment of the construction of the production of radioactivity, but what I'm trying to do is to speak about the afterlives of these nuclear weapons. It's called performing colonial toxicity. So the performance has a life. There is a temporality and speciality of those bombs, and that temporality is somehow being addressed also in the exhibition. So there is sound, there are videos, there are photographs, there are labs, but the aim is to speak about current conditions as well. And here we see in this documentary there are experts from Sandstorm, Vent de Sable. It's a movie by Larbi Ben Shiha, who is a filmmaker who went to the sites in Ainker and in Regan several times, and he was able to show the current condition, the contemporary conditions of the sites, but also of the people living there. So I think for me, this is also very important to show that even though there is a law that should be implemented, and that law says that all nuclear states should fulfill their responsibility to decontaminate and clean the sites, the nuclear sites, and they should protect also the health of the population. And that's exactly what is not happening in the case of the French authorities in Algeria. But, the Algerian authorities asked the French authority in 1999 to, let's say, fulfill their responsibility. They also called the International Nuclear Energy Agency to conduct a mission to take samples from all the sites and to evaluate the levels of radioactivity. There is a report that is also open to the public, accessible, but it has not really been implemented. So these are all, even those aspects that I'm interested in. The exhibition at Framer Framed, or the space of the exhibition, it's a former even though depot, so it's quite big, and I am working with different kinds of stations of platforms, vertical platforms, where there are multiple components or histories being told. There are like thematic moments that discuss one theme, but through a very long temporality, and also the spaces of that theme somehow is also considered. I'm also working with projectors, with screens that are all trying to tackle that one theme. So, for example, if we take even the so-called accidents that happened in the underground with the underground nuclear weapons, this accident somehow are being discussed. How come that there were this uncontained bombs, and that people were contaminated, and the recognition of that contamination has not taken place yet. Where those clouds, how did the clouds form, but also how did they move from one part to the next? So all of these aspects are being tackled and are being somehow performed. So it's not static, it's a dynamic, it's a continuous transformation of this territory and continuous devastation of the life and environment of the people living there in the Sahara, but also for the French veterans and victims that went back to France. So I still have, 3 minutes? Yes, okay. Okay. So these are like somehow, yes, I wouldn't say big, but yeah, In terms of law, since the in France, this is all considered classified. It's top secret. So I'm doing this not in France. I'm doing it in the Netherlands. They are also aware of the disobedience or of the somehow the positionality of it. I'm saying it's not secret for many people, especially the people who are suffering from the devastated consequences of the bombs. And we should make it as accessible as possible. That's why we we started with the translation project, so that audiences who don't speak French can read it in English, so they are aware of the experiences of the victims. Then we have the exhibition, so we are seeing here, it's not secret. I mean, we have filmmakers who went there, we have experts who went there, we have activists who also went there. So we do have images about it from today's perspective. We also do have images about what the French built. So it's very important to try to juxtapose all these evidence. So the audio, the visual, the textual, the historical, the contemporary, the environmental, the architectural, and the artistic. We will have also some synchronization of the audio to, for example, listen to a Geiger that's capturing the radioactivity of, one of those radioactive metal pieces that are now scattered on the soil of the Sahara. This one exactly. So this is a highly radioactive, solidified sand. It's a kind of glass today, with the heat of the bomb. These pieces of glass were formed, and they are really highly radioactive. I also in the book tried to give them a name. I think if we don't name them, we don't know what they are. The US did similar thing in Mexico with Trinity, with the heat of the Trinity bomb, with the heat of the bomb. They also had very similar pieces that also they named them. So I'm also naming them so that we know what we are talking about. And in a way, I also want in this exhibition to make it not a French, Algerian or a European African problem, but to make it a global issue. This is, everyone is somehow involved in this. And I show this with the circulation of dust and of radioactivity. So these are images that were published on The Guardian. This was last year into 2020. Oh my God, we are 2023. It was in 2021, but also in 2022. I mean, every year, actually, this has been happening since ever, that the sands of the Sahara, with the winds of the Sahara, they move, they reach Europe, but they also reach Amazonia. There are all these microclimates that happen around the world. And these are photographs that were published 2 years ago. And you see here without any filter that, European skies are, were covered with the Sahara sands. Lots of people were super excited about this yellowish, about this ochre colors. They posted them on social media, and they were really like, oh my God, this is just a wonderful sky. And unfortunately, this color, this sand, it was journalists and experts wrote about them, saying that color, that sand, was carrying some radioactive elements, and those radioactive elements are in fact coming from those nuclear bombs that were detonated between 1960 and 1966. So I really want to try to make this as a issue that is that has an impact on everyone and on many parts of the planet. It's not only in Africa, but as you can see here, it's also in Europe, because there are no border for radioactivity and radioactive dust. So I think I should maybe end here. So I tried really to give you an overview in this very short time, with this, with one, let's say, big project, Colonial Toxicity, but with these three components: the translation, the exhibition, and the book. Thank you very much for your attention.